and then some. Running with wise fools in the high noon. Can't take your money with you. Sure as hell can't.
Welcome to the RunIN podcast, episode 5, highlighting some of the weekend action here in the middle of February on the indoor track. I'm Brock Hagerman. I'm joined by
Hello, my name's Chris Walden, your other host.
host and co-host, co-host and host. We don't really have a pecking order here, I don't think. So yeah, big weekend, Chris. We've a lot of people breaking off some rust and running fast already.
Yeah, a couple meets. We had the IR showcase and the UK invite were a couple big ones, and then also up at GVSU.
Yeah, we had some big track action. UK down in Lexington's a big oversized track, great facility. Grand Valley State up in Michigan has a nice big track with sweeping turns, great facility as well. And then the showcase at Wabash College, great facility, but a small flat 200-meter track. So keep that in mind as we compare some of these performances. For those that don't believe that there's a difference between those tracks, there certainly is. I think our very own Chris Walden was hugging those tight turns at Wabash. How do those legs feel?
Yeah, a little sore. Those tight turns are definitely a little tougher on the body. It's no Nutter Fieldhouse down in Lexington.
Now, speaking of the IR showcase at Wabash, hosted by Indiana runner, we'll comb through the results here. It was kind of a who's who of Indiana high school track and field and cross country. Obviously, not everyone showed up, but we had a nice group here. So we'll start with the boys' side. And the boys 1200, we mentioned him in our last high school episode. Luke Heineman from Floyd Central seems to be on a nice campaign this indoor season, getting some work in. He won the 1200 meter run, kind of an odd event. But came through in a winning time of 3:18, so looking at about 66s. So got to think the kid's in sub 430 shape, around 430 shape possibly in the 1600. So great to see the South representing on the east side of Indiana there at Wabash and Crawfordsville. So moving down to the 3200, Chris, we had a lot of guys competing here in the 3200. What stood out to you?
Brendan Butchie won 9:22. Definitely the big standout there. I believe that's 16 laps on that little 200-meter track. So even just keeping track of your laps, holding pace, pretty impressive just as a rust buster. And then a pretty solid little lineup of people coming in after him. We had a Gino Cristofanelli at 9:26. And then Heritage Hills athletes, Mitchell Hopf, 9:29. So yeah, those are some pretty good performances out of that 2 mile.
Yeah, definitely. Those three guys going sub 9:30 on that small track for 16 laps. Pretty solid times, looking like possible medal contenders when we get later in June to the outdoor season. And I was not at the meet, and I haven't seen a video if one exists, but I believe Gino from Crown Point led most of that 3200, and I think Brennan Bucci kind of tucked in and rode that train a little bit, had a solid finish. So patient racing off of what we assume for everyone is base phase training seems to be the way to go in some of these early races. And had a handful of other guys coming in the 940 range. Dalton Kane, David Heineman coming back on a double after the 1200. 1200, 3200 meter double. You don't see that every day.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard of that. So pretty interesting.
So for Heineman to come back with a 943 after a winning effort in the 1200, he's getting some speed work in disguise, I guess you would say, a workout in disguise under the cover of a meet. And then Matthew Mitch, the pride of Delaware County in Yorktown, Indiana, coming in at a big PR 947. I believe that would have been a school record for Yorktown, according to Twitter, if it was an official Yorktown meet. So we had two other guys at 947, Brady Jarosinski and Paul Stam at Cardinal Ritter. So So yeah, great lineup there for those guys suffering through those 16 laps of tight turns. So well done.
I'm sure Coach Keppen of the Jags is looking forward to seeing Brendan Butchie show up this fall. If you listeners didn't know, that's where he'll be attending next year is IUPY.
Nice, very nice. Keppen will be happy to find that diamond coming to his campus next fall. So continuing on at the IR Showcase, boys 800 meter, we had really one real standout performance on that tight track once again. Joe Romanek from Zionsville. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Joe Romanek, I think, is how it's pronounced.
Apologize, Joe, but representing Zionsville with a 1:59.72. That's a great early season time in the boys 800 on that small track. It's, in my opinion, not that I was a big guy or a fast guy running indoor track in my time, but the faster you're running, the tighter those turns are. And I'm not a scientist, but it just seems to make sense. So
yeah, and he ran that. That's right when I showed up to meet, so I was able to kind of watch Joe, and yeah, he ran that pretty much solo. So yeah, it looks like he's been doing some good stuff. And Brock and I were kind of talking earlier. I think it's a little bit easier for the mile and 2 milers to kind of pop off a good run off their base training early here. It's a little bit tougher for those mid-distance runners. They really kind of need a little bit more event-specific training, and I'm sure they're not really getting into that quite yet. So to run sub 2 off probably what I would assume is mostly base, pretty impressive.
yeah, definitely. And Mr. Romanek he's gonna love seeing those banked turns down in Bloomington, assuming he runs some races down there during the HSR series. So
Wabash has some good facilities, but I gotta say, Gladstein Fieldhouse down there in Bloomington is a dream compared.
no doubt. So moving on to the boys mile, we had a headliner in this field, probably the marquee story of the entire track season. Making his first appearance, Mr. Cole Hawker of the Fall Creek Track Club and Cathedral High School during the IHSA season, throwing down an opening mile time for a full mile, 1,609 meters, 4:12.70. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I watched Cole run. I think he took it out in about a 61, close in a 64. He had a little push from behind early, but I know he was kind of looking to this race to kind of throw down. I don't know if he's looking to maybe get a good seed time for something else coming up soon, but you could kind of tell he was into it. He was ready to put down something good, and I won't toot his horn too much here because I know there's going to be a lot more to come from Cole, and we're excited here on this podcast to see what he can do. So 4:12, 4:11, 1,600 converted. Indiana state record holder now, I believe. So yeah, Cole Hawker, stud.
Yeah, it's an incredible early season time, converting it down to 4:11 for a 1,600. Like we've said many times already, flat 200-meter track. Believe it or not, the NCAA gives conversions for flat 200-meter tracks to kind of equate it to a oversized or banked 200-meter track. So if you were generous and put it on the NCAA performance list, kind of even converts down to a 4:09-ish probably for a 1,600, which is nearly his PR. I mean, he ran 4:08 at the state meet last year. Obviously had that 4:05 split in a relay. But to think he's in close to PR shape right now, running solo without any true competition pushing him to the line. Yeah, I mean, he's meeting expectations right now, and we'll be patient.
It's about what I expected. My coaches used to always say kind of the 3% rule. You want to be within about 3% of what you were last season. So 3% of 4:08, I think, is about 5 seconds. So yeah, he was within that. So yeah, he's looking good, and I'm sure he's looking forward to the next one.
Let the hype continue, and we'll continue, as well as everyone else, continue to analyze his season in detail. So moving on in the boys mile, I had some other fine performances. Obviously, Hawker is on a level of his own right now in Indiana, but we had Mr. Luke Combs from Lapel coming in second place with a 4:22.0 for the full mile. Shout out to the pride of Madison County. I was telling Chris off air that Madison County is one of the historically most underrated counties, in my opinion. Several state champions, Foot Locker National qualifiers, the legendary Anderson High School dynasty from the 1940s and 50s hailing from Madison County. This was before Carmel. It was Madison County. So yeah, Luke Combs looking to continue on that Madison County tradition. I believe he's the fourth returner in the 1600 meters coming back from last year. So making a statement early here saying that he's back. So we had Lucas Guerrera from up in the region in Highland coming down to Crawfordsville. Another strong race, 4:24.1 for the full mile. He's only a sophomore, Chris, so he had a great cross-country season. He was all-state in cross, I believe. Ran really well up in the region all cross-country season, and ran the mile last year as a freshman, a great freshman miler, and I think he's looking to really make a name for himself this year. So any advice for a sophomore miler going into the outdoor season here?
Yeah, just stay hungry, get in there, mix it up, just keep learning. You know, you have a couple more years ahead of you, so don't be afraid to make some mistakes, take some risks, and hopefully learn from your experience.
Yeah, great early season time though, 4:24, so roughly 4:22-ish for the 1600 on that flat track. We had a few other guys. Chris, if you want to go through this list here.
Yeah, so after Lucas coming in, you know, there was right behind him, 1 second behind him at 4:25, Alex Frey. I see here he's running for the Panthers, so not too sure where his track club is at, but now up next after him was Cole Powers of Tuhoy TC. And this was actually pretty interesting. He was the one kind of pushing Cole at the start. I think he kind of was with him through about 800 meters before the previously mentioned fellows kind of swallowed him up. Then up next was Quinn Gallagher with a 4:31. Caleb Beimfor, sorry if I screwed up your name there, running for Harrison at a 4:31 as well. Another 4:31, Isaiah Holleris from Villarado Track Club, who ended up winning that DMR later in the evening. And then coming in 9th overall with another 4:31 was Nicholas Ruskowski. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too bad. But yeah, a lot of good little racing going on back there behind Cole. This is kind of where the real race was happening. Cole was up there doing his thing, but then these other guys were kind of, I think most of them were opening up their season, kind of knocking the rust off. It was a little bit of a crowded race, a lot of bumping elbows and kind of trading blows and positions. It's kind of what you're going to expect in indoor. A little bit more tactical and jockeying for position on those tighter turns and shorter runways. So overall, great race. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from these names coming up.
Yeah, no doubt. Great meet overall on the boys' side, but we had some equally solid performances on the girls' side at the IR showcase down at Wabash. So the girls 1200 had a performance that really stood out. Lauren Reinhardt took the victory for Zionsville. Came through with a finishing winning time of 3:52.15. I believe that equates out to about 77s roughly. So got to think she's in close to 5:15 mile shape. So would have been very competitive in the mile as well. And then in the girls 3200, we had Brooke Dixon of Brownsburg with a very fine time of 11:10. Comfortable margin of victory, so not really pressed to the line. Once again, those 16 laps on that small track. Got to think on a bigger track, maybe with a little more competition pushing her to the line, might be in sub-11 shape this early in the season. So congrats to both Lauren and Brooke on some fine early season performances. Looking for them to continue that momentum as we get into the HSR season. Girls 800, we had a big name show up, Chris.
Yeah, 800, Abby Lynch from Brownsburg, the third returner from state last year. If you didn't listen to our pilot I encourage you to pause the podcast right now and go back and listen to that. We kind of do a little in-depth of those top 3 returners. 217 for her yesterday at the showcase. And kind of, again, like we were saying from the fellow from Zionsville, the 800 is a little bit tougher to really pop off some hot times this early unless you've been doing that event-specific work. So, 217, pretty impressive.
Yeah, great to see Abby busting some rust this early. And what was interesting is a few of her fellow competitors in the 800 meters were actually at this meet, but they seemed to either accidentally or intentionally avoid each other, or just different priorities at this time in the year. Very interesting to see the priorities in athletes on what events they choose in February, early season. It's more training at this point, But Abby obviously stuck to her bread and butter, the 800 meters, but we had Elizabeth Stanhope and Julia Dvorak, Pike and Homestead athletes, both the 2nd and 4th returners in the girls 800. They all bumped up to the girls mile. So they were all under the same roof this weekend, but different events. So speaking of the girls mile, we also had another big name in addition to those 800 girls in the girls mile, the defending champion, a greyhound from Carmel, Phoebe Bates.
Yeah, Phoebe, kind of similar to Cole. She was going to be one of the big headlines coming in. You kind of figured she was the one to be looking at, and she's the defending state champion. And she took it out and kind of controlled the race from the front, just right from the start, just like Cole did. And Stanhope went with her and was kind of just right on her all the way through. And then that last kind of 400, 200, Phoebe just stepped on the gas just a little bit. But both of them were looking pretty good all the way through. And it was a great race. And like Brock just mentioned, coming in after that were the 2nd and 4th place returners from the 800 last year, maybe looking to bump up, or at least just doing a little over distance here early. And so Phoebe 5:05, Elizabeth 5:07, and Julia at a 5:14. So great run from those top 3. Kind of rounding out the top 5 was Sydney Little of Floyd Central at a 5:15, and Leah Kiesling of Randolph Southern with a 5:16.
Yeah, great girls mile at Wabash in the IR Showcase. However, one of the events of the evening was the community/coaches mile. I'll do the honors of leading this one off here. We had Aaron Becker, Noblesville, running a 4:43, and then the runner-up finisher, running unattached but as a Guerin coach, 4:45.70, Mr. Chris Walden. I'll let you take it from here as you're talking about a few other of your colleagues.
So gotta give our shout outs to Aaron Becker, running 4:43 and then following up with a fantastic long run this morning. So quite impressive, representing his school. I'm sure his Noblesville athletes loved seeing him out there putting it down. But I'm very proud to say that Guerin Catholic was able to put 3 coaches under 5 minutes. I'd wager that's never been done before, and if it has, I would love to hear all about it. That was great. Myself, Coach Chris Walden, and my 2 comrades, Coach Andy Cowan and Coach Tom Ullman, able to throw it down a little bit there in the community mile.
Do you guys have any other races on the schedule coming up? Any other community miles that you're looking to enter the pack of 3?
I think there's kind of an unofficial coaches race after every meet. It's kind of a little bit of an underground, racing circuit. Usually the coaches always get together and have a little race after every meet. This one was a little bit more high profile. But maybe not so publicly. In general, I would say being an athlete kind of requires one to be selfish, and being a coach requires one to be selfless. So racing not so much. We're going to be focusing on our athletes and their success.
Words from the wise Coach Chris Walden right there. So looking forward to seeing this underground. Again, we're not going to see it if it's underground, so maybe we'll just hear some rumors about future coaches' races on this podcast. So after the showcase, we also had the Grand Valley State big invitational, elite invitational up in Michigan.
Brock, I'm going to hold you right there real quick. I want to throw, there was one more race after those coaches' races. There were some boys DMR. I already gave a shout out to that Valeradero track club. But in the girls, it was a pretty fun, exciting race to cap off the night in the girls DMR. It was a Carmel team versus a mixed team of West Lafayette and I know Lulu Black, who is a Hamilton Southeastern Royal. I've seen her come into the store at Endurance House here in Fishers. So she's a good little runner, and those West Lafayette runners, they run for another friend coach of mine, David Jost, there at West Lafayette. So they were separated by a second. It was a big last lap from Phoebe Bates. After running that 5:05 earlier, she came back with a 5:10 and closed in a 34 to seal it for her team. So I know the Carmel girls were having fun with it, and I'd say the Hounds had a pretty good day across the board. So just wanted to give them a quick little shout out.
Yeah, great DMR for those girls.
But on to GVSU, the big track, big meet. Let's hear it.
Oh man! So
start us off here, Brock.
We will start with the boys 3200. There were a few sections of this race. There was the open section that looked like it led things off and had some great performances in the open section. Ryan Rupert from Homestead won the open section in a time of 9:24. So obviously it would have been extremely competitive at the IR showcase with Bucci, you would have imagined. And then we also had Drake Kropf of Concordia and Wilson Wicker of Concordia coming in at 8th and 11th place in the open section. Kropf running 9:46, Wicker running 9:49. And so great runs for the Concordia cadets and the Homestead athlete. Concordia looking pretty strong right now in the distance events. Obviously one of the favorites next year in cross country, and they're showing why on the oval already. So sticking with the 3200, we did have an elite section up at Grand Valley State. Very unique meet. To my eye on the video, looked like all the athletes were kind of geared out, maybe in the same singlets, same outfits. So Grand Valley's putting on quite an event up there, sponsored by Adidas, I believe. So we had 2 Indiana athletes in this elite section, and they lived up to the name of that section. They were quite elite. Coming in 5th place was Caleb Futter from CAI, 9:03. And then 6th place, right behind him, Reese Gibson, Concordia, 9:04. So let's talk about those times just a little bit. Show some respect to those. 9:03, 9:04 for Futter and Gibson.
Yeah, those are incredible indoor times. Granted, like we mentioned previously, it was on an oversized track, but I mean, that usually is going to put you in the hunt to win the indoor state meet or the Hoosier State Relays 3200 if you're running close to 9 minutes like that. I mean, there was a time where that probably put you in the hunt to win the outdoor state meet most years. So to be dropping times like this mid-February, yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's I'm very fascinated with the quality of that meet up there at Grand Valley. For Futter and Gibson to come in 5th and 6th with those very fast times tells you how deep and elite that field was up there. I believe 2 individuals went sub 9, I think 8:57, 8:58-ish, and then obviously 2 other individuals kind of low 9:01, 9:02-ish, 9:03. So extremely fast race. I believe it was a negative split race, which in my opinion, Chris, is probably the only way to run fast off of base phase training, assuming all these athletes are on a level playing field, all are kind of in the middle of that standard base phase, not doing a lot of race-specific work. That negative split is not a crazy shock to the system when it comes to running that 1600 or running that fast pace early for that first mile. So yeah, I think it was a great opportunity for those guys, and they definitely took advantage of it. That's what you like to see. When you get an opportunity to run fast, you get a train to draft off of and lead you to a fast time, you take advantage of it. And getting a chance to watch the video, looked like Reese Gibson really put his nose in that race. He was in third place at the bell, right on the shoulder of the two guys that ended up going sub-9. Had a kind of a tough last lap there, but it's middle of February. So he was right there, had a chance to go sub-9, came in at 9:04. Caleb Futter was closing hard and caught him at the line. Futter was maybe dropped a little bit before the bell with the chase pack. But yeah, very interesting race. Those two guys, Futter and Gibson, definitely made a statement that they're probably all in on the 3200, I would think. Granted, it's February, things can change, but like we said in the pilot and previous episodes, there are how many medalists returning in the 3200?
Nada.
None.
Zero.
None. So it's not only wide open for the medals, but it's wide open for the state championship, and obviously nobody knows what Cole Hawker's going to do yet, and you know, a lot of room to make a name for yourself, whether it's with medals or rings. So
those are hot times. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't run that fast until May. Not to say that they won't, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't.
yeah, it's not a reflection on fitness or the ability to peak necessarily. It's just you're not going to find those races around
Right.
with perfect indoor conditions on big tracks, and it's hard to find a 857 train to jump on. So kudos to them though, they took advantage and ran some great times.
How about that girls 3200 elite?
Yeah, we had another Fort Wayne product. A lot of Fort Wayne athletes going up to Grand Valley, obviously close proximity. Aaron Strzelecki, Fort Wayne Bishop Dwenger, throwing down a sub-11 performance with a 10:55 for 12th place in the elite section up there. So she continues to roll. We've mentioned her on previous episodes and had a great cross-country season, clearly. So yeah, excited to see how she continues to roll this indoor and outdoor season. So we went up north to Michigan. We stayed in Indiana for the showcase. Now let's go to our southern neighbors down in Kentucky, at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. Had a Carmel Hound running in the 800 meters.
Yeah, it's Eli, and I got a quick name check. Sorry, Eli, I butchered it last week, but Eli Kono, Carmel Greyhound, running 154.48, lowering his previous mark of 155. Yeah, this is pretty crazy stuff. I think that puts him somewhere like top 10 in the nation indoors right now. So that race just went off kind of like the way that 3200 went up in Michigan. The 800 down here, just like you get some good dudes in a race and none of them want to lose, and they end up running pretty fast. So
yeah, and Eli took third place in that Elite 800 down at Kentucky. It's a big track down there, so conducive to faster times indoors. But 154 this early. Obviously, he ran 155 a few weeks ago. He's continuing to drop time, and that 800 was hot down there. I mean, there was kids coming in from Texas and all over, and a handful of guys, looked like about 10 guys running 157 or faster indoors. So good race to be in. Eli, once again, good to see a Indiana kid take advantage of a good situation and run a fast time and be competitive. But we also had another Indiana athlete down there running extremely well. In 12th place, Howard Hendricks from North Central Indianapolis with a 157.88. So, yeah, it's not an eye-popping time when you compare it to outdoor Elite 800 times, but you got to think Mr. Hendricks running that fast in February indoors, he's going to be a 155 or faster guy outdoors on a bigger track, better conditions. So, and then moving on to the full mile, once again another 1,609-meter race. Jack Gillard, the junior from Bloomington South, he is the third returner in the boys 1600 coming into this outdoor season, throwing down a 4:23.15 for the full mile. So that would have been right in between Combs and Lucas Guerrera at the IR showcase. So some of these returning milers, dusting off the rust here early and showing why they're the top 4 returners in the mile. So good job to Jack representing Bloomington South. And then on the girls' side down at Kentucky, we had another half miler, Claire Severn from Evansville Memorial, running a 2:18.3. So kind of in that Abby Lynch from Brownsburg neighborhood at the IR showcase, that 2:17, 2:18 range. She took 14th place in the 800 meters. So that girls 800 this year, a lot of returners, a lot of newcomers. Should be hot on the middle distances at the Indiana State meet in June. So that's all we have for the high school scene, Chris, right?
Yep, that's all we were able to at least find on our own. And again, I'll mention it now. If you ever feel like you're left out, or of a good result that came in, get it to us early. Hit us up at our podcast email. I believe it's indianaruncast@gmail.com. So that's all we were able to ascertain for the high school indoor seasons so far this past weekend.
It was a big weekend. A lot of good performances, and it's only going to get faster from here. So, but we did have some college news.
We'll touch on some college news real quick. One off the top of my head, I know another coaching friend of mine, Nolan Fife, over at the Fighting Illini. His DMR broke their school record. I don't know the time off the top of my head, but congratulations to Coach Fife and the Illini for a good result there. What else we got here, Brock?
We had the Alex Wilson Invitational, which is kind of a lot of last chance meets at the Division I level this week before the conference weekend. But Alex Wilson invite at Notre Dame. And we had a lot of middle distance performances in the 800 meters. So we'll start with the DMR. Big run from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Nice to see the Irish getting relevant again after a few tough years on the mid-distance to distance side. But Sam Voles, who is a New Palestine product here in Indiana, state 800-meter champion as a senior. He actually went to DePaul, a Division III school in Greencastle, his freshman year. He's now a sophomore at Notre Dame, transferred from D3 to D1. And he's making some big statements in his sophomore year, first year at D1 for the Fighting Irish. He was part of their DMR relay that came within 0.12 seconds of the all-time NCAA DMR national record. And he ran the 800-meter leg and split a 1:48. That's moving. Even on a big track up there at Notre Dame, 5 laps to a mile, 1:48 is moving. And obviously the top time in the NCAA right now, Fighting Irish looking like they could possibly win the national title in the DMR.
Yeah, the Irish got a good little group there, especially a young team that's showing up. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do and kind of grow with their training group and their coach. I believe they got the #1 recruiting class this past year. So, that young class is pretty hot. And, with sophomore transfers doing stuff like this, they got a bright future ahead.
Yeah, no doubt. And then we also had in the Open 800, we'll start with a freshman from IU, Jalen Royal, Fort Wayne Northrop product, setting yet again another PR. We mentioned him in our last college episode, but he's dropping times continually. 1:49.65 in the Open 800 for 5th place. Very, very strong performance, and he's probably not going to get into the national meet in the 800. He very well could represent the Hoosiers on a qualifying DMR time or qualifying DMR team. But yeah, that's great for a true freshman.
And I'm sure they'll be looking for him to score some big points at the Big Ten. And he'll have another good opportunity to try and make it into that top 16 descending order list. But 149 doesn't really seem like it's cutting it these days. So we'll see. Speaking of an Indiana 800-meter runner, and this is one of one of probably the biggest storylines, I would say, next to Cole Hawker in Indiana this week is Cooper Williams throwing down a big 147.24 to win the race up at the Alex Wilson 800. And to my knowledge, this is a national record for Australia. So according to their website, he's an Australian representative, and so he now holds their indoor 800 meter national record. So big congrats to Cooper Williams. That's really awesome.
Absolutely incredible, and I believe we don't have Tiefers open right now, but I believe that puts him in the top 16 as well in the Open 800. So he's looking to hopefully punch that ticket to indoor nationals at the D1 level, probably in addition to the Hoosiers DMR team if they're also qualified. So congrats to Cooper. Way to represent Indiana and Australia at the same time. Very impressive. Looking forward to seeing what Big Tens hold for the Hoosiers and other athletes and the rest of our former Indiana alumni high school athletes as they finish up the indoor season over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, so that currently puts Cooper 8th on the descending order list on Tiefers. So
fantastic. He's probably in with that, I would think. I mean, there can be some movement on the conference weekends, but you got to think a lot of the races could be a little more tactical conference weekends and running rounds and prelims. It's maybe a little more difficult to run 147, 146. But hey, D1's crazy. I don't put anything past anyone. So, well, that concludes episode number 5 here on RunIN podcast. Thanks for providing us with a lot of great performances to analyze, and looking forward to seeing more times drop, hotter races, more competitive races. And for Chris Walden, I'm Brock Hagerman, and look forward to talking with you guys next week.
Cool, and you can always find us at MileSplit, or you can also find us straight at our YouTube page. It's just run space IN. You can also find me at Waldenism on Instagram, and my Indiana runner handle is Logic Runner. So feel free to reach out, and we gave you that email if you have any suggestions for us in future episodes. Thanks.